But the best quote from Bill Buckingham is, and I quote, "I know who sanctioned it, who did it, and who is behind the hit. If I know it, why don't state police know it?" Hey guys, so I am back with my little minion. We love her. She is great. Today we are going to be putting on our tinfoil hats because I have a conspiracy theory, a big one. So today we're going to be talking about the death of Jonathan Luna. Now, Jonathan Luna grew up in a housing projects in the Bronx, and he put himself through college and became an attorney. So like I said, Jonathan Luna grew up in a housing project in the Bronx, and he went and graduated from Fordham University with his undergraduate degree, and actually went to the University of North Carolina Law School and graduated there in 1992. So that's where he met his wife. His wife, Angela, is an obstetrician. So she's a doctor. Jonathan was a really hard worker. He was really driven. His resume shows that. So he worked at jobs like Arnold and Porter in DC, which is a multinational law firm. It's a huge law firm. I mean, they have their own wiki page. Like, they're really well known. He worked at the Federal Trade Commission for a while, which is another biggie. Like, he had an impressive resume. But in 1999, he moved to Baltimore, Maryland to be an assistant United States attorney. So he is a federal prosecutor. Yeah, so again, this is a guy who pretty much did this himself. He was not someone who grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth that mommy and daddy paid for, you know, the best schools and all of this. He worked hard and he got where he was, which is really impressive. So the cases he handled as a federal prosecutor were pretty dark. He handled child pornography cases, drug cases, I mean, just a mix of some really violent things. But the entire time all of this is happening, as he's building his career, him and his wife Angela, and at the time their first child, buy a townhouse. And they move in, and his mother-in-law, Angela's mother, moves in with them. After time, he actually moves his parents out of the Bronx and into an apartment close to him so he can visit him. I mean, this is a family guy who's worked really hard and whose life seems to be going really well. He's got a lot of accomplishments under his belt. So again, we just have what seems like a really wholesome family man who's doing really well for himself in his career. So he was really well liked by his colleagues. There was a new boss though. The new boss, Thomas DiBaggio, they didn't seem to see eye to eye. There was some tension. There has been reports of possibly some racially motivated tension. Jonathan Luna himself was African American and Filipino, and some other people that worked under DiBaggio have come forward and said that there was some tension there. Now, Jonathan had gotten so worried to the extent that he had actually hired a lawyer for his troubles at work. Now, he had a couple of other things that weren't going great at the time. I know a lot of cases you read about, or a lot of things you read about this case, they kind of put it as it being Jonathan's problem, when these problems that he was having at work were more of a, like, the entire office's issue, and he just happened to be part of that, if that makes sense. The first one was he was working on a drug trial at the time of his death, and they had an informant who was supposed to be supervised at all times. Their informant actually ended up getting arrested with heroin while he was supposed to be supervised. Yeah. So that ended up being a big deal, which caused some problems for this trial that they're trying to go to. The other thing that had happened during this time was that a previous case that he had worked on, $36,000 ended up going missing. Now, Jonathan was supposed to take a lie detector test, but so was everyone that had worked on that case. He actually didn't get to take that test because he was killed. And before that, he had rescheduled, citing work conflicts that he couldn't come in to take it. Now, a lot of people run with this and feel like, oh, obviously he's guilty. He didn't want to take a polygraph. He tried to not take the polygraph. And sometimes it almost seems like in news articles that he was the only one that was going to be asked to take a polygraph, which is just not true. Everyone in the office was going to have to. The other thing that I think is really important to point out here is that he did not just have unfiltered access to this money. This money that went missing, they actually never found this $36,000 that went missing. It was in the custody of the FBI. So again, this is like evidence from I believe it was a drug case. It's evidence. So you would have to go and sign in that you were needing to look at the evidence, like an evidence room type thing. He couldn't just walk in and take this money. There's security. You're at a federal courthouse. So a lot of crazy things going on there. And we're going to give cute little Gracie a crime tip. You never take a polygraph. Innocent or not, and this is what I find.
And isn't it like something with your heart rate or something? Like if you're nervous around?
They're not accurate. They're not admissible in court. You cannot use them in a court case. So why they are getting all up in arms about an attorney who would know that you cannot use this polygraph in court, not taking it, is hysterical. I mean, maybe they're trying to psych them out and see, okay, who's willing and who doesn't have an issue or whatever. But again, don't ever take a polygraph. On December 3rd, 2003 is when things go from a little off to just bizarre. So Jonathan Luna, who is 38 at this time and has 2 kids, he is working on a plea agreement for a drug trial that he is currently working on. He's working on that. He ends up going home around 5 to have dinner with his family because, again, here's this man who is very family-oriented. His mother-in-law lives with him. He moved his parents from New York to Baltimore and put them in an apartment close by. Just, I mean, seems really normal. He goes back to his office at the courthouse and he calls the defense attorney. And he's like, okay, I'm working on this plea agreement. I'll have it faxed over to you by midnight. But that doesn't happen. So what ends up happening instead, and I do want to just point out that you have a man who has an impressive resume. This is not someone who says they're going to do something and then doesn't do it. And I mean, I think this trial was going to be like the next day. They were trying to get everything done before morning. So this was a time crunch. So at 11:30, he leaves the courthouse without his glasses and gets in his car, okay? So again, this is Baltimore, Maryland. He drives, and he drives. He drives to Pennsylvania. He drives to Delaware. He takes a really circuitous route on the I-95 Turnpike. Now, the Turnpike is toll roads. They're toll booths. So he has an easy pass, so he can just use this easy pass, not have to stop at the toll booth, get a ticket, go through all of that, slowing him down. He uses the easy pass for the first 3, and then he stops using it. He starts buying tickets. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah. He's also, during this time, he has withdrawn $200 from an ATM. Okay. Again, he has, and this ATM was in New York, Delaware, and that was at 12:57 a.m. Okay. He crossed the toll bridge in Delaware to the Pennsylvania Turnpike at 2:47. So there's a big time gap there. And when he gets to Pennsylvania, he got gas with his debit card at 2:47. Now, there are reports out there that he got 2 tanks of gas, which there's no proof. There's no proof that he got 2 tanks, but I've seen it in a lot of places that say he did. Now, whether he filled someone else's tank up, whether he had a gas can in his car, I don't know why you would need it at that point, because again, I mean, he's supposed to be a trial. So some crazy things going on there. There's also a report, because he got the gas with his debit card. But there's also reported another gas station that he went in and bought drinks. Like sodas, you know, whatever. But again, every article is very clear on this that it was drinks plural. Now, I don't know about you, but like if I'm by myself and I go to the gas station to get a drink, I'm getting
Myself.
a drink. I'm not getting multiple.
No.
Especially if you're going to be in your car, you know, you're going back to work. Like that's not a time that you would, I don't know, stock up on your favorite energy drink or whatever. At 4:04 a.m. And again, he started this multi-state trip he left the courthouse at 11:38, exactly according to their cameras. He gets off the turnpike at 4:04 a.m. This is the middle of the night. There's not going to be a lot of traffic. I mean, there's at least an hour and a half of time there that's unaccounted for. Nobody knows what he was doing, who he was with. So after he exits the turnpike, his car was parked in front of Sensnig and Weaver Well Drilling Company. Okay, so it's in northern Lancaster, Pennsylvania. His car's parked there at around 4-ish. But at 5:30 a.m., employees notice that the car has gone into a creek. So the car isn't noticed until 5:30 a.m. by an employee at the drilling company. Now, the employee noticed it because the headlights were off, but there was a red light flashing in the car. So like some type of light on the dash, I'm assuming. Now, when they go, there is blood on the driver's side door. There's a pool of blood in the passenger seat rear of the vehicle. Cash was also kind of strewn around. I can find nowhere that says how much cash, so we don't know if this was the $200 that he had withdrawn from the ATM or just they were digging through the car, someone was digging through the car. It's not really clear. What is clear is that as they go and look at this car, they realize that Jonathan Luna himself is by the tire, almost under the car, and he has been stabbed. He has been stabbed a total of 36 times with a small pocket knife, penknife type thing. Now here, as we get into what I'm about to go over next, go ahead and put your tinfoil hat on. Go ahead, Gracie, put it on. Put your tinfoil hat on, okay? So Luna's cause of death was not the stabbing. Now, I know, it sounds crazy, but when he went into this creek, when he went into the water, he was still alive, and he actually aspirated the water. So the official cause of death was drowning. Had he not been in the water, some of the wounds were superficial, but there were a few that would have eventually led to his death. So again, you have him with 36 stab wounds. The police could not find the weapon. The area is obviously cleared up. They're looking for any evidence they can find, but they don't find this penknife that was used to stab him. Now, this penknife was actually found 2 months later in the creek and turned out to be Jonathan's own penknife. Yes. Still got your tinfoil hat on?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we're about to get into it. Okay. So the coroner, again, cause of death is drowning. The manner of death, which is going to be, you know, was this a suicide? Was this a homicide? Was undetermined. They could not decide if it was suicide or homicide. Another weird coincidence to me is you're going to see a lot of information come out at this time. There's going to be information that he was sexually mutilated with the stabbings, that he had defensive wounds on his hands from the stabbings. As far as what the coroners have to say, there were no defensive wounds on his hands. There was no mutilation. All of the stabbings were to his head and neck, shoulder area. But at the same time that this is happening, as they're getting into this investigation, there are, and I don't know if it was more than one or just one, but there is basically like a confidential informant. Supposedly in the FBI, maybe in law enforcement, okay? And this person comes out, again, confidentially, nobody knows who it is, but everything that they kind of leak to the media and the press has absolutely nothing to do with the case. It's almost like they're trying to discredit Jonathan Luna as a person. They go on to, leak that he was $25,000 in credit card debt. That they found a dating profile online with his name. They can't really prove it's him. It hadn't been accessed since 1995. Again, he was married in 1995, but that has absolutely nothing to do with what's happening presently, what happened to him. So more and more things like this keep coming out, just kind of detrimental to his character. There's nothing released about the case. There's nothing super helpful. Again, it's almost just kind of like gossip, just girly high school gossip. So at this time, authorities decide that this is a suicide. So they actually go to the coroner and they're like, you need to say it's a suicide. Exactly. And he's like, but is it? Because they can't really prove either way. So he ends up not changing his ruling. Manner of death is undetermined. One other thing I want to point out about this, 2 years earlier, a Seattle prosecutor was shot in his home. It was basically an execution style killing, like they shot him through a window in his basement. He was working. The police and authorities, this is basically one of their own. Same with Jonathan Luna. They work very closely together. This is a big deal. There's $1 million reward for information about this prosecutor in Seattle. But for Jonathan Luna, they basically are trying to prove that he committed suicide. And now maybe he did. I'm not saying that, but there's no evidence to support without a doubt that it was suicide. Now, they do find some DNA. So remember how I said he had the easy passes for the tolls and then eventually switched to toll tickets?
Oh gosh.
They found blood on one of these toll tickets. They also found DNA from 2 people in his car. Now, what was released, as far as the testing, nothing has ever been released. They've never said if they found a match, who it was, what was anything. Another really interesting twist in this case that just doesn't it make you want your tinfoil hat? Like, it makes me want my tinfoil hat because I just feel like something's wrong. So there was an interesting update to this case in 2020. Again, this case happened in 2003. So in 2020, the coroner's report was believed to be in the hands of the FBI because, again, this is a federal prosecutor. This is a big deal. So it wasn't. It was actually found in the county archives, kind of accidentally, like it was kind of lost and someone stumbled upon it. Now, the current DA in I guess Baltimore, I'm not sure if it would be Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where his body was found, or in Baltimore, where he was from. Either way, the DA has decided to seal his coroner's report, so the autopsy. All of the findings, they are sealed. They are not, no one can look at them. The FBI claimed the case was still active for Jonathan Luna in 2020. But there had been multiple reports from the Washington Post claiming it had been administratively closed. Now, again, I'm not sure where the Washington Post is getting their information. Is it from this, informant who's been leaking all this stuff about Jonathan Luna as a person? So I think it's really sad for this case specifically is Luna's parents are dead. They have since passed away. They never really got justice for him. His brother, because he did have an older brother, but he couldn't really be located for comment. But Daniel Rivera, who was Luna's childhood best friend, kind of became a spokesperson for his cold case because that's where we're at. This is a cold case at this point. The FBI has issued a reward for any information about what happened to Jonathan Luna. But the most interesting thing I found in all my research was Bill Buckingham, who is a private investigator and former police detective, had a lot to say. Well, maybe not a lot, but what he had to say made a lot of sense to me. If Jonathan Luna was somehow talked into leaving the courthouse, or someone came in, because again, for a while they were trying to say that this drug trial he was about to go into the next morning, that those individuals that were being charged, they somehow committed this, whether they hired somebody to take him out, whatever. It's a federal courthouse. There are cameras, there are metal detectors, there are security guards 24/7. You cannot just walk into a federal courthouse and leave with someone. But the best quote from Bill Buckingham is, and I quote, "I know who sanctioned it, who did it, and who is behind the hit. If I know it, why don't state police know it?"